Okay, here we go. My name is Jonathan Becker, and this is a small portion of theater-masks.com. I'm a teaching artist and a mask maker, a movement specialist, if you will. Masks are movement captured in rigid form. And I've had the opportunity to make masks over the past 30 years or so for actor training programs all over the world, professional producing organizations, individual artists, film, television, and I've gotten the opportunity to work as a guest artist in 31 different institutions in 6 different countries. So that's just a little tiny bit about me and what is in these forms that we're going to explore today. I wanted to touch on this format that we're working in because I think that it allows us to talk about the principles behind the mask work and the performance that was experienced in ancient Greek times in a way in which we can talk about what's missing here in our virtual communication. The masks, live theater, the exchange between performers and an audience is really about an extension of energy through space. It's about a communication between peoples that is kinesthetic in nature, that is intuitive in nature, and that is visceral. And all 3 of those are by and large lost, if not completely absent, in this type of exchange that we're having. Ancient Greek theater was part of a ritual celebration for the peoples of the time. It was part of their spiritual beliefs and their relationship to the earth as well as to the gods. And so for them, it was an incredibly dynamic exchange and that collective feeling that one gets when one is in a room with thousands of people or in a place with thousands of people experiencing the same thing together. And that is what is lost in this environment. The masks also, in many ways, the lessons that they have to teach us are difficult here in the virtual world because we can see the mechanics of the masks, we can see their form, but we can't receive the changing energies that pass through them. It's difficult to see the masks shift in their expression in this particular environment. And what's lost in that really are the stories that the masks have to teach us. One of the things that we're talking about today, and one of the reasons for this particular presentation, has to do with the work of a maker, being inspired by the world around us and then creating something by hand and the value of that. Because when we create by hand, it winds up by its very nature celebrating the imperfections that are contained within. And as a matter of fact, it is the imperfections that allow it to live. And so very much a reflection of humanity. It is our imperfections that define us and that make us unique, that separate us from others. And it is our imperfections that require that we come together so that we have more than one person in a room at a time so that we can actually effectively solve problems. And this is the mask work. This is what we get from the masks. It is about creating things by hand. I believe that in order to create beauty, there has to be a certain organic quality to it, an imperfection, a chaos. By its very nature, beauty is chaotic. Look at a tree or look at a flower. Look at a landscape, just a cacophony of rhythmic shapes and forms creating music for the eyes, if you will. And this is the form of the mask. The masks are rhythmic form. They are essentially music captured in a rigid container, and that rhythm of the interacting lines and planes of the masks are designed to animate the space around the mask so that they appear to change shape, they appear to change expression as they move through space or as the body moves underneath them. And the knowledge set, the skill sets that are involved in creating that are multifaceted. The first being the actual working with the materials. And that's the easy part, that's the simple part. The masks are first sculpted in a water-based clay. And this is a sculpture here that is being created. And we can see that half of the form has begun. And this half over here is the rough draft and is still being changed and pushed around. And when I've completed that, I will repeat it on the other side or do on the other side what this, the more finished side dictates. It's just my process. It's not the way that all sculptors and mask makers work. It's just how I have developed over time. And then once this is finished, I'll create a plaster mold of the mask. And this is a negative mold of one of the Greek theater masks that you can see here. See the inside of the mold so that you can see sort of the expressive nature of this particular mask. And then once the mold is created, it gets filled with a liquid, and the liquid is a synthetic latex. It comes in a big old bucket like this. The material sits in the molds for 3 hours or so and then poured out. The plaster wicks the moisture out, and behind is left a film. And when the film is pulled out, it looks a little bit like this. And this is an untrimmed piece. This is actually a commedia mask. It's not a Greek theater mask. And then once they're trimmed out, there's one here, right, that's been trimmed. And then they get base coated, and then finally the finish paint. And this is one of the Greek theater masks here. And this piece is, it's a lot of things, and I'll talk about sort of where the ideas and the inspirations come from in a minute. But you know, it's based on the forms of Greek and Roman sculpture, but it is not reflective of the actual traditional Greek masks that were used at the time. In that it's a half to a 3/4 mask as opposed to a full face mask with the mouth left open so that the actors could speak and be heard through the mask itself. This is more of a contemporary take on that to help make the performance and the relationship between the masks and the audiences a little bit more acceptable in our contemporary theater. So that's why the masks that I'm working with have that form. The inspiration for the masks comes from a lot of places. It comes from my understanding of emotional and passionate response. So an understanding of how, say, fear or joy or lust or anguish moves through space. Its architectural form, the architectural forms of anguish or of fear, the musicality of those passions, rhythmically, how does lust manifest? How does joy manifest, right? And then how they move through space, that directionality and the weight of joy, the weight of anger or despair, right? And all of that understanding then becomes part of the rhythmic planes and lines of this expressive form. And then there's another part of that has to do kind of with an anthropological understanding of human beings and of culture. And if you look back here, you can see a couple of masks that have been created. This one several years ago, and then this one over here much more recently. Both of these are a combination of cultural form. So this one is representative of really a mask that looks very much like this, but one from each continent of the globe. And then it is also inspired by the ancient cave drawings that were found in France so many years ago. So a very primitive form in many ways that is celebrating the origins of mass performance. And then this piece over here is a dragon mask that is a combination of the Chinese dragons, the Japanese dragons, the Celtic dragons, some other forms that are more contemporary, right? And then my own take on that. And this is a double mask. As we tip it up, we find another mask here at the bottom because it's worn on the head at the top like this so that it's performed toward the audience with the actor looking at the floor. And then when it comes up, we find the face here so that the dragon soul can speak. So that's these two pieces. And this cultural research, this sort of anthropological reach into the understanding of different peoples and different times, is a lot of what is inspiring these forms here. And this one is a little bit more of a deconstructed abstraction with the way that the lines and planes are so graphic than, say, something like this, which has much more of a kind of a realistic shape and or form to it in relationship to the character that, or the human being that it represents. This one here also very much of a sort of a deconstruction, a poetic abstraction of the facial features for the play in which it was created. And this reaching out into the world, finding human beings that inspire me, that I see something in, a moment of anguish, a moment of fear, a moment of celebration, a very mundane moment in daily life. These are observations and inspirations that find themselves into the masks, as well as a real deep understanding into the force of life that existed at a particular time or in a particular place. Our ancient Greek theater, the ancient Greek societies were an incredibly vibrant and visceral environment in which to live because of the relationship to the earth and then the reach into the heavens and so on. So that type of a life energy has to be contained within the various masks and the various forms that are being created. I think it's really important to continue to point out the importance of the fact that these are created by hand, and then that the way in which they can be experienced is in a reach through space, an exchange, a conversation between human beings in the same space together. And this is something that we really cannot lose, because this environment doesn't allow for a kinesthetic and intuitive sensory response to what it is that we are experiencing. It is, puts us in a position of pure observation. We can disassociate and detach ourselves from what it is that we're watching and experiencing, and then it's a purely intellectual endeavor rather than one that involves a real visceral, intuitive or kinesthetic response in the moment of exchange. And in a moment here, I'm going to put on these masks and very briefly sort of demo them so that you can see kind of how they exist on the body a little bit. And the difficulty, of course, is going to be that our on-camera environment isn't very nice to our live theater environment. It falsifies it in a way. So what appears to be true and honest often in our live environment looks really clunky, overly large, and not really acceptable for the on-camera. So we're going to give it a try so that you can see the masks on the human body, and hopefully that'll give us a little bit more understanding into this form. Hecuba says, you know me. I am here with a message, lady. Talthybius, Apollo, god of love, god of poetry. Ah, wretched me, that love is not a disease that can be cured with an herbal remedy. I am Mercury. You can call me Hermes. I am Polydorus, youngest son of Hecuba and Priam. Look, there is Hecuba at the door of Agamemnon's tent, tortured by the nightmares of my ghost. And so there's a very brief demo of some of the forms, and as we review the video, we'll see whether or not that worked well. So there you have it in brief. Process, the inspiration, the value of making things by hand. You know, this rush into technology is something that I think we should always consider and step back from every now and again, so that we might once again experience the value of the ancient ways of doing things. This particular technology that we're looking at today of mold making with plaster molds is a technology that is close to 6,000 years old, and it won't ever get any better. And it allows for us to capture moments in time in a way that this cannot. The vibrancy, the fabric of it is something that has a life of its own that cannot be replicated by a machine or by a computer in a 3D print. It really is something that we can only have a relationship to in a live environment. And there it is. Thanks.